Grace, mercy, and peace to you from God our Father and our Lord Jesus the Christ. You should see the faces of the little ones during the sermon, the children's sermon. They were just wonderful. And, sometimes people say, well, it's noisy, but boy, that's a beautiful noise. And we can be grateful to God that He's allowed us so many wonderful baptisms in this past year. Thank you. Karen and I met at a church called Christ the King, which was just outside of the Columbus area. And it was a church that was charismatic. And Karen and I were in that congregation, and we were enjoying the wonderful spiritual effervescence, if you will, in that church. And then the time came when the property around 161 and 71 became so valuable that the church decided to sell its plot and go on without them someplace else. One day as I was driving by, there was a sign, one sign that was huge in the front yard of this church, and it said, Christ the King. And right next to it, there was another sign for the hotel that had brought the property, and it said, Comfort Rules. And that's the issue sometimes for us. We allow our comfort to rule who we are. Rather than pick up all the little ends and odds and ends and turn them into blessings, we have a tendency to say, comfort rules, and I deserve a break today. I don't want to go into all the different advertisements which make a mockery out of Christ the King, but I do want us to focus on the whole idea of how Jesus Christ leads you and me into a world which can only be called difficult. And that's sort of a very mild term for it. We have so many problems in our society, and we wonder how we can deal with all of them. But there's always some bright spot. We have so many people who have brought food for us, especially one family. We thank them, and we thank all of you for being here with us. Now, the reason I go into this long introduction is that in Colossians, which was the second reading, in Colossians, Jesus says something that is extremely important for us to capture. And let me read the portion again. For by Him, by Jesus, all things were created in heaven and on earth, invisible, invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through Him. How can you resist the fact that all things were created? How can we decide on our own that we don't need to have this Creator in our lives? Or how can we, even worse, decide that you and I have the right to have the God that we want, regardless of the God who is in the Bible? And so we continue to read, He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything He might be preeminent. In everything He might be preeminent. First. In everything He might be first. We are challenged in the Bible to put Christ first. Not just first and then second something else. In everything we should put Christ first. And that's the challenge for you and me. Let's see, today we can sort of outline quickly what it means to put Him first. He, first of all, should be the first in our faith. First in our faith. What does that mean? Well, it means that you and I are challenged by Jesus to put him in the place that is truly first in everything that we do. In everything that you and I do. So first, we should be putting him in our faith. And that may sound redundant, but the reality is that most of us don't put Christ first in our faith. We have other desires, other interests, we have other challenges. And some of that is good. And that's why it makes it so difficult. Because we choose the good if we can. And yet often we don't know what the good is. But you can't go wrong if we put Christ first in our faith. Second of all, we should put Christ first in our families. In our families? Do you put Christ first in your family? Or does he get the leftovers that a dog can come and eat off the floor? How about you? Do you pray as members of a common family? When was the last time that you prayed as a family member? You know, I hear people say it's sad that we have a country where we cannot have prayer in our schools. But before that was an issue, we have to recognize and acknowledge that you and I have failed to put Christ first in our families. And we have taken him out of our families, and then we had no one left in our schools. So first, faith in our faith, first in our families. The next one is first in all the ways in which we try to present ourselves rather than Christ. We should put Christ first because that's where he belongs. We should put Christ first because if we don't put him first, what are you putting him in place of? What are you putting in place of? And you and I, need to remember that we can put him first in our fellowship. First in our fellowship. Do you have a fellowship that centers around Christ? Do you have a fellowship that not only centers around Christ, but allows Christ to rule rather than comfort? So fellowship here in this congregation, it's so important that we continue to be fellows, so that we can actually incorporate and internalize the Christ who loves us. And finally, and there are many other firsts, but that I have chosen for this particular passage, sermon, finally, we can put Christ first in our future. How much time is spent trying to secure your future? Bank accounts? Not only bank accounts, but insurance policies. And we can go on and on and on where we put Christ second or third or fourth because we have planned our future. In fact, you and I are considered to be irresponsible if we don't plan for our future. And yet, tell the people in our congregation who have had relatives who have died that all the plans for their future went to naught. Now, how do we summarize this? We summarize it, I believe, by taking a good look at John 14. We put Christ first if we obey him. if we obey him. Do you obey him? Are you in a position where you are able to answer John in the 14th chapter, where Jesus says through John, says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you." To have loved one another as Christ has loved us. You see, we are required to abide in his love, and we can only do so if we become his friends and rely on him. On whom do you rely?